This is the story of Iran. It is a story that stretches back over 5,000 years, a vast and complex tapestry woven with threads of empire, conquest, revolution, and remarkable survival. We begin on a map, a bridge between East and West for millennia, situated at a critical crossroads of trade, culture, and conflict. Iran's geography has been both asset and vulnerability. Zagros Mountains, Caspian Sea, civilizations that shaped human history. Our timeline begins with the Elamites and carries through to the present, a people that has always found a way to endure. The central question: how has Iran survived? For 5,000 years, this land has seen empires rise and fall, Achaemenids, Sassanids. It weathered devastating invasions, Alexander the Great, Mongols under Genghis Khan, Tamerlane. It absorbed cultural and religious shifts, Zoroastrianism, Islam. Through every crisis, collapse, and new beginning, a distinct identity survived and often flourished, absorbing conquerors and reshaping destiny. This documentary is a clear, fast-paced chronological journey. We won't drown in forgotten dynasties. We'll focus on pivotal moments and key figures. We start with Cyrus the Great and the founding of the Persian Empire. We'll race through the centuries, clashes of civilizations, golden ages of art and science, turmoil and fragmentation. Our path: medieval upheavals, Safavid glories, Pahlavi modernization, the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Finally, the turbulent present and the 2026 crisis. Assassination of Ali Khamenei, succession of Mojtaba Khamenei, regional war and closure of the Strait of Hormuz. By tracing this often bloody history, we uncover reasons for Iran's resilience. We'll explore geography, layered institutions, the Persian language, and religious identity. Table of Contents, Part 2, Act 1, Ancient Persia and the Classical Era. Section 1, the first superpower, the Achaemenid Empire. Section 2, the conqueror arrives, the Hellenistic Age. Section 3, the Parthian Revival, resilience on the frontier. Section 4, the Sassanid Zenith, rivalry with Rome and Persian Renaissance. Okay, let's begin. Our story of Imperial Iran begins in the 6th century BCE with a figure who would change the world, Cyrus the Great. Emerging from the highlands of Persia in modern-day southern Iran, Cyrus united the disparate Median and Persian tribes. He then embarked on astonishing campaigns, conquering the Median Empire, the Lydian Empire, and the Neo-Babylonian Empire. More than a conqueror, Cyrus was a visionary statesman. He established a model of governance built on tolerance. He freed the Jewish people from Babylonian captivity, allowing their return to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. This act is documented in the Cyrus Cylinder, often seen as the world's first charter of human rights. The Achaemenid Empire reached its zenith under Darius the Great. Darius was a master organizer who consolidated Cyrus's territories. To rule peoples from Egypt to the Indus Valley, he created provinces or satrapies governed by satraps. He built the Royal Road, stretching over 2,500 kilometers from Susa to Sardis. The road sped communication, trade, and troop movement. Darius standardized coinage, weights, and measures. He set Aramaic as the administrative language. He founded the ceremonial capital, Persepolis, with sprawling palaces and intricate reliefs. Representatives from across the empire brought tribute as respected members of a universal state: Lydians, Ethiopians, Babylonians, and other peoples in procession. Persepolis art shows a harmonious procession, the Achaemenid ideal. The empire was a civilization built on an ideology, the kings as agents of Ahura Mazda, upholding Asha, truth and order, against Druj, lie and chaos. Their rule was framed as restoring divine order. The Achaemenid Empire's administration, infrastructure, and tolerant ideology became a blueprint for later empires, establishing Persia as a world power and shaping Iran for millennia. The spectacular reign of the Achaemenids came to a sudden and violent end with the arrival of a young, ambitious king from Macedonia, Alexander the Great. In 334 BCE, Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Asia Minor, initiating a campaign to topple the Persian Empire. The aging Persian state was weakened by internal court intrigues and by rebellions. It struggled to counter Alexander's military tactics and the disciplined Macedonian phalanx. Battle, Granicus. Battle, Issus. Battle, Gaugamela. He shattered the Persian armies led by Darius III. The conquest culminated in the burning of Persepolis in 330 BCE, a symbolic end to Persian supremacy and the dawn of a new era. Alexander's conquest was a collision of cultures. He sought to fuse Greek and Persian civilizations. He encouraged his soldiers to marry Persian women. He adopted Persian court ceremony, including proskynesis. His Macedonian veterans were dismayed. After his death in 323 BCE, the Diadochi divided his empire. Seleucus took Persia and the East, founding the Seleucid Empire. For the first time in centuries, foreigners ruled the Iranian plateau. Seleucid kings built Greek-style cities across the region. Seleucia on the Tigris became a new Hellenistic capital. Greek became the language of administration and of high society. Greek art spread. Greek architecture spread. Greek philosophy spread. Greek science spread. The Hellenistic age challenged Persian identity. Zoroastrian priesthood and old nobility lost privilege, replaced by a Greek-speaking elite. Yet Persian culture was not extinguished. It retreated to local communities and rural heartlands, quietly resisting assimilation. Beneath Greek rule, the seeds of Persian resurgence were sown. The Seleucids focused west, warring with the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt, and their grip on the plateau weakened. Local traditions persisted. The Zoroastrian faith continued. The Persian language continued. Foreign domination failed to erase Achaemenid memory. It created tension between Hellenistic and Persian worlds, setting the stage for the rise of a new native dynasty. A dynasty that would reclaim the legacy of Cyrus and reclaim the legacy of Darius. The Hellenistic yoke on Persia began to fray at its eastern edges. The Hellenistic yoke on Persia began to fray at its eastern edges. The Hellenistic yoke on Persia began to fray at its eastern edges. In the mid-3rd century BCE, a semi-nomadic Iranian tribe, the Parni, swept into Parthia. They moved into the Seleucid satrapy of Parthia, in what is now northeastern Iran. Led by their chief, Arsaces I, they overthrew the local Greek governor. They established an independent kingdom. This was the beginning of the Arsacid, or Parthian Empire. Initially a minor regional power, the Parthians gradually expanded their territory. They exploited internal conflicts and external pressures, weakening the Seleucids. Their great king, Mithridates I, captured Mesopotamia and the Iranian plateau, effectively restoring Iranian rule to the heartland of the old Persian Empire. The Parthians were masters of resilience and adaptation. Rather than eradicating Hellenistic culture, they absorbed it. They patronized Greek-style art and theater. They referred to themselves as Philhellenes, friends of the Greeks, on their coinage. At the same time, they were consciously reviving Iranian traditions. They traced their lineage back to the Achaemenids and championed aspects of Zoroastrianism. This synthesis of Hellenistic and Iranian culture created a unique and vibrant civilization. Their political structure was a hybrid, a king of kings ruling over a network of powerful local vassals. The Parthians are perhaps best known for their formidable military, particularly their cavalry. They perfected warfare relying on swift, mobile horse archers and heavily armored cataphracts. The famous Parthian shot, feigning retreat then turning to fire, became legendary. This military prowess brought them into direct conflict with Rome. For nearly 3 centuries, the Parthians and Romans were locked in grueling wars over the Near East, Armenia, and Mesopotamia. The Parthians annihilated a Roman army under Crassus at Carrhae in 53 BCE. This long struggle defined the Parthian era and set a shifting frontier along the Euphrates. While constant warfare drained resources, it solidified Parthian identity as defenders of Iran. They successfully halted Rome's eastward expansion, keeping Persia independent. By blending traditions, a resilient polity, and military deterrent, the Parthians revived Iranian sovereignty and created a durable empire lasting almost 500 years. Section 4. The Sassanid Zenith. Rivalry with Rome and Persian Renaissance. The long reign of the Parthians eventually came to an end because their system allowed decentralization. The decentralized feudal structure let vassal kings grow powerful and independent. In 224 CE, Ardashir I rose in rebellion from the province of Persis, the Achaemenid heartland. He claimed Achaemenid descent, defeated Artabanus V, and crowned himself Shahanshah. He founded the Sassanid Empire, restoring and elevating Persian power and culture. The Sassanids' centralized power, modeled on the Achaemenid ideal of a universal monarchy. Under the Sassanids, Iran experienced a cultural and religious renaissance. They made Zoroastrianism the state religion, empowering the Magi. They codified the Avesta and built fire temples across the empire, a unifying ideology to bind diverse subjects and to oppose the Christianizing Roman world. Persian art, music, and literature flourished. Ctesiphon's colossal vaulted arch showcased monumental Sassanid architecture. The central drama was their centuries-long struggle with Rome and later the Byzantine Empire. It was a clash of titans, two superpowers vying for dominance over the Middle East. The rivalry was more than border skirmishes. It was total war for territory, resources, and ideological supremacy. Shapur I achieved stunning victories, even capturing the Roman Emperor Valerian in 260 CE, an event immortalized in magnificent rock reliefs. These wars ebbed and flowed, with devastating conflicts followed by uneasy truces. The conflict drained both empires, but it spurred military innovation and defined the classical world for over 400 years. The Sassanid Empire at its peak was a sophisticated bureaucratic state. It presided over a prosperous economy, fueled by control of Silk Road trade and maritime routes through the Persian Gulf. Society was organized into a rigid caste system. Priests, warriors, scribes, commoners. Centers of learning like the Academy of Gandhishapur became a melting pot of Greek knowledge, Indian knowledge, and Persian knowledge, especially in medicine and philosophy. The Sassanids created a powerful, distinctly Persian civilization. It was the last great pre-Islamic Persian state, seen as the classical ideal for future Iranian dynasties. Table of Contents, Part 3, Act 2, Medieval Upheavals and Cultural Survival. Section 1, The Crescent and the Crown, the Arab-Islamic Conquest. Section 2, The Persian Phoenix, Contribution to the Islamic Golden Age. Section 3, The Mongol Storm, Destruction and the Ilkhanate. Section 4, The Last Great Steppe Lord, Tamerlane and the Turco-Mongol Aftermath. Section 1, The Crescent and the Crown, the Arab-Islamic Conquest. The magnificent Sassanid Empire, exhausted by centuries of warfare with Byzantium, faced an unexpected and decisive challenge in the 7th century. From the Arabian Peninsula emerged a new dynamic force, united by the nascent religion of Islam, the Rashidun Caliphate. Driven by religious zeal and brilliant military leadership, launched a series of campaigns. The Byzantine Empire was pushed out of Syria. The Byzantine Empire was pushed out of Egypt. The Sassanid state, internally weakened by political instability and by social unrest, proved surprisingly brittle. In a series of catastrophic battles, Al-Qadisiyah, 636 CE, Nahavan, 642 CE, the formidable Sassanid army was shattered. The last Sassanid king, Yazdegerd III, became a hunted fugitive. By 651 CE, organized resistance had collapsed, bringing an end to over 4 centuries of Sassanid rule. The Arab Islamic conquest was a profound shock to the Persian psyche. For the first time in nearly a millennium since the brief interlude of Alexander, Iran was incorporated into a foreign empire, and this time, the change was far more fundamental. The conquerors brought not only a new government, but a new religion and a new social order. Under the Umayyad Caliphate, which succeeded the Rashidun, Arabic became the language of administration, and Arabs formed a new ruling class. Non-Muslims, including the majority Zoroastrian population, were classified as dhimmi, or protected people, who were required to pay a special tax known as the jizya. While forced conversion was not the official policy, social advantages, political advantages, economic advantages led to a gradual but steady process of Islamization across the Iranian plateau over several centuries. The initial decades of Arab rule were marked by resentment and numerous local rebellions. The conquest severed the link between the Iranian crown and its ancient faith. Yet, the spirit of Persia was not extinguished. The cultural and administrative legacy of the Sassanids proved too deep and sophisticated. The Arab conquerors, who had little experience in managing a vast, complex empire, soon found themselves relying on Persian bureaucrats and scribes. The Sassanid system of taxation, land management, and court etiquette was largely adopted by the Caliphate. This administrative continuity ensured that while the rulers had changed, the underlying structure of governance retained a distinctly Persian character. It was this quiet, bureaucratic persistence that laid the groundwork for a remarkable cultural survival, demonstrating that even in defeat, Persia's influence would endure and eventually transform its conquerors. Section 2. The Persian Phoenix. Contribution to the Islamic Golden Age. As the initial shock of the conquest subsided, a remarkable transformation began to take place. Instead of being completely absorbed, Persian culture began to reassert itself within the new Islamic framework. The overthrow of the Arab-centric Umayyad Caliphate in 750 CE by the Abbasid dynasty was a pivotal moment. The Abbasid revolution was heavily supported by Persian converts and drew its power from the eastern, Persian-influenced part of the Caliphate. The Abbasids moved the capital from Damascus to the newly founded city of Baghdad, located near the old Sassanid capital of Ctesiphon. This geographical shift symbolized a political one. The Caliphate became increasingly international and, in many ways, Persianized. Sassanid court rituals, administrative techniques, and styles of dress were adopted by the Abbasid caliphs, who modeled themselves on the old Persian King of Kings. This new environment allowed Persian intellectuals, scientists, and artists to thrive, and they became the driving force behind the Islamic Golden Age. Persian scholars writing in Arabic, the new lingua franca of learning, made extraordinary contributions to a wide range of fields. Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, a Persian mathematician, developed algebra and introduced Hindu-Arabic numerals to the Western world. The very word algorithm is derived from his name. Physicians like Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, wrote the Canon of Medicine, a medical encyclopedia that would be a standard textbook in both the Islamic world and Europe for centuries. Simultaneously, a powerful literary movement began to reclaim the Persian language itself. This movement culminated in the late 10th and early 11th centuries with the poet Ferdowsi and his epic masterpiece, the Shahnameh, or Book of Kings. This colossal work, comprising some 60,000 rhyming couplets, retold the mythical and historical past of Iran from the dawn of creation to the Arab conquest. By writing in pure Persian with minimal Arabic loanwords, Ferdowsi consciously sought to preserve the language and cultural memory of his people. The Shahnameh became the foundational text of Persian national identity, a testament to the enduring glory of pre-Islamic Iran. This cultural flourishing demonstrates a key aspect of Iranian resilience, the ability to absorb and reshape external influences. The Persians embraced Islam, but they shaped it in their own image, infusing it with their own traditions and philosophical outlook. The rise of Persian-speaking dynasties like the Samanids and Buyids in the 9th and 10th centuries, who ruled with de facto independence while paying nominal allegiance to the Abbasid Caliph, further cemented this cultural revival. They became great patrons of Persian art, architecture, and literature, creating a new Perso-Islamic civilization. Iran had not only survived the conquest, but had emerged as the intellectual and cultural heart of the Islamic world, proving that a political empire could fall while its civilization rose to even greater heights. Section 3. The Mongol Storm, Destruction, and the Ilkhanate. Just as Persian culture was enjoying a vibrant renaissance, a new and terrifying threat emerged from the east. In the early 13th century, the Mongol armies of Genghis Khan swept out of the Central Asian steppes, unleashing a wave of destruction previously unimaginable. The Khwarezmian Empire ruled Iran and Central Asia. It provoked the Khan's wrath, leading to a full-scale invasion in 1219 CE. The Mongol campaign was an onslaught of sheer terror. Cities that resisted were systematically annihilated, their populations massacred without mercy. Nishapur razed, Merv razed, Samarkand razed. Libraries and schools turned to ash. Connaught irrigation systems destroyed. Fertile land turned to desert. The devastation was cataclysmic. Chroniclers wrote of rivers of blood and mountains of skulls. Modern historians estimate Persia's population fell by as much as 3/4 due to war, famine, and disease. The Islamic Golden Age came to an abrupt and brutal end. The Second Mongol Wave, led by Hulagu Khan, in the 1250s completed the conquest. In 1258, Hulagu's forces sacked Baghdad. The seat of the Abbasid Caliphate fell. The last caliph was executed. The Abbasid institution ended after 5 centuries. Hulagu established the Ilkhanate in Persia. The Ilkhans ruled as a fief of the Mongol Empire. Initially, they were foreign conquerors, following nomadic traditions and shamanistic practices. They imposed a harsh, exploitative regime. The Persian administrative class was called on to manage the state again, but under Mongol military governors. The early Ilkhanate saw economic ruin and cultural stagnation. Urban and agrarian society was shattered, replaced by nomadic pastoralism favored by the Mongol elite. It left a deep, traumatic wound in Persian memory. Over generations, Persian culture began to civilize the conquerors. Mongol rulers started to patronize Persian art and architecture, producing a fusion of Chinese influences and Persian traditions. At the end of the 13th century, Ghazan Khan converted to Islam. This reunited the dynasty with the faith of its subjects. Ghazan Khan and his Persian vizier, Rashid al-Din, initiated major reforms to rebuild economy and administration. The Mongols transformed from destroyers into patrons of a new Perso-Mongol culture, once again demonstrating Iran's capacity to endure and transform its invaders. Section 4. The Last Great Steppe Lord, Tamerlane, and the Turco-Mongol Aftermath. The Ilkhanate collapsed into competing successor states after 1335. A political vacuum opened in Persia. Out of Central Asia rose Timur, Tamerlane. He claimed descent from Genghis Khan. In the late 14th century, he launched brutal campaigns. Timur used extreme violence and terror. He swept through Persia. He swept through Anatolia. He swept through northern India. Cities burned. Refugees fled. Fields lay ruined. Timur was infamous for pyramids of skulls. Skulls were displayed at Isfahan. Skulls were displayed at Baghdad. His conquests were even more destructive because they struck a land trying to recover. He shattered the fragile political and economic order. His campaigns prioritized plunder and raw power, not stable governance. For Iran, it was a terrifying relapse into chaos and bloodshed. The fragile stability under the Ilkhans was undone, Timur saw himself as a world conqueror. Persia was one prize, yet he was a paradox, destroyer and patron. He seized the best architects, he seized the best artisans, he seized the best scholars. He relocated them to Samarkand. The Timurids presided over a Timurid Renaissance. It produced miniature paintings. It produced grand architectural monuments. It produced important scientific works. Samarkand became a glittering court of art and learning. Later, Herat also shone as a cultural center. Timur's death in 1405 shattered his empire. Persia fragmented under Timurid princes and Turkoman dynasties. The Black Sheep Confederation rose. The White Sheep Confederation rose. Turco-Mongol military elites grew politically dominant. Yet Persian language, administrative traditions, and culture persisted. Poets, scribes, and artists kept the thread of Iran alive, setting the stage for the next revival. Section 1. The Safavid Ascent, Forging a Shia Nation. Out of the political chaos left by Timur's successors, a new movement arose. It appeared in the late 15th century. It was centered on the Safaviya Sufi order, based in Ardabil, northwestern Iran. The order was originally Sunni. It gradually adopted a militant Twelver Shia Islam. This happened under charismatic leaders. They built a fanatically loyal following among Turkoman tribes. Those followers were the Kizilbash, also called the Redheads. They wore distinctive crimson headwear. In 1500, teenage Ismail led the Kizilbash to conquer Tabriz. He proclaimed himself Shah of Iran. He declared Twelver Shi'ism the state religion. This birth of the Safavid Empire redefined Iran's identity. Ismail's imposition of Shia Islam was radical. Most Iranians, and much of the Islamic world, were Sunni at the time. Ismail enforced conversion with ruthless force via the Kizilbash. Sunni clerics were executed. Others were forced into exile. Shia scholars were imported to build a new hierarchy. They came from Arab lands like Lebanon and Bahrain. This policy created a deep schism with Sunni neighbors, notably the Ottoman Empire to the west, and the Uzbeks to the east. The Safavid state became a Shia island in a Sunni sea. Religious differentiation became the cornerstone of a new national identity. It forged a bond between state and creed, not seen since the Sassanids. Early Safavid rule was essentially a military theocracy. Shah Ismail was viewed as semi-divine by his followers. Religious fervor fueled rapid expansion across the Iranian plateau. This restored Persia's traditional borders. But the power structure was unstable. Kizilbash leaders were immensely powerful and acted as kingmakers. That caused intense civil wars after Ismail's death. They vied for control over his young successors. Survival required transforming into a centralized bureaucracy. This challenge defined the first century of Safavid rule. The Ottoman conflict became the defining geopolitical struggle. The Ottomans, leading Sunni power and claimant to the caliphate, saw a Shia state as a grave threat. In 1514, Sultan Selim I dealt a devastating defeat at Chaldiran. He used superior firepower, cannons, muskets. The Kizilbash cavalry lacked those weapons. The Ottomans couldn't hold Persian lands permanently. Chaldiran shattered Ismail's aura of invincibility. It began a long, draining rivalry. External pressure forced the Safavids to consolidate power. They modernized their military and forged a state strong enough to defend its religious and political identity. The Safavid Empire reached its absolute zenith under Shah Abbas I, also known as Abbas the Great, who reigned from 1588 to 1629. Ascending to a throne beset by internal strife and foreign threats, Abbas proved to be a brilliant and ruthless strategist. He systematically broke the power of the unruly Kizilbash chieftains, creating a new standing army composed of Armenian converts, Georgian converts, Circassian converts who were loyal only to him. This new force, equipped with modern gunpowder weapons, reclaimed territories from the Ottomans and Uzbeks and secured the empire's borders. Abbas' centralized power, reformed the administration, and laid the foundations for an era of unprecedented prosperity and cultural brilliance. He transformed the Safavid state into a true Persian empire. The crowning achievement was turning Isfahan into the new imperial capital. He moved the capital from Qazvin to Isfahan in 1598 and began an ambitious urban redesign. The city was built around the magnificent Naqsh-e-Jahan Square. The square was flanked by 4 Safavid masterpieces: Shah Mosque, Sheikh Lutfullah Mosque, Ali Kapu Palace, Imperial Bazaar entrance. Isfahan became a showcase of imperial power and a vibrant commercial and cultural hub. Isfahan is half the world. Under Abbas, Safavid culture flourished into a golden age of Persian art. Royal workshops produced exquisite silk carpets, intricate miniature paintings, and delicate ceramics. Isfahan's architecture, luminous blue-tile domes, soaring iwans, complex geometric patterns, became the face of Persian Islamic design. Abbas courted European merchants and envoys, opening trade links that brought great wealth. He established a state monopoly on silk, funneled profits into the royal treasury, and financed armies and monumental building projects. His statecraft solidified the foundation of modern Iran. He created a centralized bureaucracy, a loyal standing army, and a state-sponsored Shia religious establishment. The Isfahan Renaissance reinforced a Perso-Shia identity. Safavid art, architecture, and ideology became embedded in national consciousness. Even after the dynasty fell, the idea of Iran as a Shia nation centered on Isfahan endured for centuries. The magnificent edifice built by Shah Abbas proved to be fragile. His successors were a series of weak and ineffectual rulers who preferred the pleasures of the harem to the responsibilities of governance. The powerful state machinery that Abbas had created began to decay through corruption and neglect. The military lost its edge and the court became consumed by intrigue. This internal weakness was exacerbated by a growing religious intolerance, as the increasingly powerful Shia clergy persecuted the remaining Sunni minorities within the empire, particularly the Ghilzai Afghans in the eastern province of Kandahar. This persecution ignited a rebellion that would ultimately bring the entire Safavid dynasty crashing down in a stunningly short period of time. In 1722, a small army of Afghan rebels led by Mir Mahmud Hotak marched across the Iranian plateau and laid siege to the capital, Isfahan. The incompetent Safavid government and its demoralized army were completely incapable of mounting an effective defense. After a brutal 7-month siege that led to mass starvation and death within the city walls, Isfahan fell. The Afghans sacked the glorious capital, massacred thousands of its citizens, and deposed the last effective Safavid Shah, Sultan Hussein. The collapse was shockingly swift and total. It plunged the country into a period of chaos and fragmentation, as the Afghans struggled to control the vast territory they had conquered, while the Ottomans seized the opportunity to invade and annex Iran's northern provinces, and the Russians seized the opportunity to invade and annex Iran's western provinces. From this turmoil emerged one of the most remarkable military figures in Iranian history, Nader Shah. A brilliant commander of Turkoman origin from the Afshar tribe, Nader initially rose to prominence as a general in the service of the surviving Safavid claimant. He systematically drove the Afghans out of Iran and pushed back the Ottomans and pushed back the Russians, restoring the country's borders. In 1736, he felt powerful enough to depose the last puppet Safavid ruler and crown himself Shah. Nader was a military genius on par with Alexander and Napoleon, and he embarked on a series of breathtaking foreign conquests. His most famous campaign was his invasion of Mughal India in 1739, which culminated in the sack of Delhi and the seizure of an immense treasure, including the legendary Peacock Throne and the Koh-i-Noor diamond. Despite his military brilliance, Nader Shah was a harsh and brutal ruler with no talent for civil administration. His constant campaigns drained the country's resources, and his attempts to reverse the Safavid policy and promote a religious synthesis of Shia Islam and Sunni Islam failed to win support, alienating the powerful Shia clergy. His reign became increasingly tyrannical and paranoid, and he was ultimately assassinated by his own officers in 1747. His death immediately plunged Iran back into anarchy. His vast empire disintegrated overnight, leading to another half-century of brutal civil war between his successors, the Zand dynasty in the south, and a new rising power in the north, the Qajars. Nader's brief, violent reign had saved Iran from foreign domination but failed to provide lasting stability. Following the chaos after Nader Shah's death, a new dynasty eventually consolidated control over Iran. The Qajars, a Turkoman tribe that had been part of the original Safavid Qizilbash Confederation, emerged victorious from the long civil war. Their leader, Aga Muhammad Khan, a notoriously cruel and ruthless figure, brutally unified the country and established Tehran as his new capital in 1796. The Qajar Shahs, lacking the divine charisma of the Safavids or the military genius of Nader Shah, sought to legitimize their rule by positioning themselves as the protectors of the Shia faith and the inheritors of the Persian monarchical tradition. They adopted the grand titles and court ceremonies of past empires, but their actual power was far more limited, relying on a loose balance of power with tribal chieftains and provincial governors. The Qajar era coincided with a dramatic shift in the global balance of power. The 19th century was the high tide of European imperialism, with Russia advancing from the north and Great Britain protecting its interests in India to the east. The Qajar state, with its decentralized structure and technologically backward army, was no match for them. In two disastrous wars with Russia early in the century, Iran was forced to sign the Treaty of Golestan in 1813 and the Treaty of Turkmenchay in 1828, permanently ceding its territories in the Caucasus, including modern-day Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. These humiliating defeats were a profound shock, marking the beginning of a long period of foreign encroachment and the erosion of Iranian sovereignty. Economically, Iran also became increasingly subordinate to European powers. The old Silk Road trade routes, which had enriched Persian empires for centuries, had long been eclipsed by new maritime routes controlled by Europeans. Qajar Shahs, desperate for funds to maintain their lavish courts and pay for limited modernization efforts, granted extensive economic concessions to Britain and Russia. These concessions gave foreigners control over key sectors of the Iranian economy, from banking and telegraphs to tobacco and oil exploration. This economic penetration sparked widespread popular resentment and fueled the rise of nationalist and religious opposition movements, which saw the Qajar dynasty as corrupt and subservient to foreign interests. This period of pressure gave rise to the first stirrings of modern Iranian nationalism and calls for reform. A small but growing number of intellectuals, educated in Europe or influenced by Western ideas, began to advocate for a constitution, the rule of law, and a stronger central government capable of resisting foreign domination. This ferment culminated in the Constitutional Revolution of 1906, which forced the reigning Shah to accept a constitution and establish a parliament, the Majlis. Although the revolution's gains were soon undermined by internal divisions and Anglo-Russian intervention, it was a landmark event. It marked the first major challenge to the absolute power of the monarchy in 2,500 years and set the stage for the political struggles that would dominate Iran in the 20th century. Table of Contents, Part 5, Act 4 will cover Section 1, the Pahlavi Dynasty, Modernization and Authoritarianism, Section 2, the 1979 Revolution, the Shah falls and Khomeini rises. Section 3, the Islamic Republic, war, consolidation, and defiance. And Section 4, a new century of unrest, protests, and the path to 2026. The weakness and instability that plagued late Qajar Iran came to a head in the early 20th century. The country was fragmented, its sovereignty compromised by foreign powers, and its government ineffectual. In 1921, a military commander named Reza Khan orchestrated a coup d'etat, seizing control of the government. Reza Shah spent the next 4 years consolidating his power, building a modern national army, and sidelining the last vestiges of Qajar authority. In 1925, he deposed the Qajars and crowned himself Shah, adopting the dynastic name Pahlavi. He embarked on a radical program of top-down modernization and secularization, determined to transform Iran into a centralized modern nation-state. Reza Shah's reforms were sweeping and authoritarian. He built national infrastructure, including the Trans-Iranian Railway, established modern factories, created a secular education system and a new judiciary, and stripped the Shia clergy of their traditional roles in law and learning. He imposed Western-style dress, banning the veil for women, and requiring men to wear European-style hats. He aimed to forge a national identity based on pre-Islamic Persian glory, downplaying Iran's Islamic heritage. Yet these reforms were enforced with an iron fist. Political dissent was crushed, the press censored, and parliament reduced to a rubber stamp. Reza Shah's reign was a paradox: national revival through intense repression. His reign ended abruptly during World War II. Iran declared neutrality, but its location and Reza Shah's perceived pro-German leanings led to an Anglo-Soviet invasion in 1941. The foreign powers forced Reza Shah to abdicate in favor of his son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The early years of the new Shah were tumultuous: foreign occupation and a brief political opening. Nationalist Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh rose to prominence, championing the nationalization of the British-controlled oil industry. The move was wildly popular at home, but provoked confrontation with Western powers and culminated in the 1953 coup orchestrated by British and American intelligence, which overthrew Mossadegh. After 1953, Mohammad Reza Shah ruled with vast oil revenues and a close alliance with the United States. He accelerated modernization with the White Revolution in the 1960s, implementing land reform, literacy campaigns, and women's suffrage. Iran urbanized rapidly, and a new, educated middle class emerged. The country became a major regional power with one of the world's most powerful militaries. But the facade of progress hid deep tensions. The Shah's rule became increasingly autocratic, and his secret police, the Savak, grew notorious for brutal repression. Rapid secular modernization alienated traditional society, while vast oil wealth and corruption fueled widespread resentment against the ruling elite. By the late 1970s, the foundations of the Shah's rule were cracking under the strain of deep-seated opposition. Secular intellectuals demanded political freedom and an end to American dominance. Students demanded political freedom and an end to American dominance. The merchant class, or bazaris, felt alienated by the Shah's economic policies. Urban poor who migrated to cities were disillusioned by inequality and assaults on traditional values. Uniting these factions was Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. From his base in Iraq, then in France, Khomeini articulated his ideology. He called for social justice. He called for anti-imperialism. He called for an end to monarchical tyranny. Khomeini's sermons were smuggled into Iran on cassette tapes. The message resonated with millions of Iranians. He condemned the Shah as a corrupt, un-Islamic puppet of the United States. He called the Shah West Oxified and a betrayer of culture and independence. Beginning in 1978, protests and violent government crackdowns escalated. Each crackdown produced martyrs. Their 40-day memorial services turned into larger protests. Scattered demonstrations grew into a massive nationwide movement. Millions chanted in the streets, "Death to the Shah." Millions chanted, "Independence, freedom, Islamic Republic." The sheer scale overwhelmed the regime. The Shah's regime crumbled with astonishing speed. The military, the bedrock of power, began to disintegrate. Conscripted soldiers refused to fire on citizens. Some soldiers joined the protesters. The Shah's American allies were uncertain how to respond. The Shah seemed paralyzed, wavering between concession and brutal repression. In January 1979, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi fled Iran, never to return. His departure signaled the end of 2,500 years of continuous monarchical rule in Persia. 2 weeks after the Shah's flight, Ayatollah Khomeini made a triumphant return to Iran, greeted by millions. His arrival marked the decisive moment of the revolution. A brief power struggle ensued between the provisional government of secular nationalists and the clerical forces loyal to Khomeini. The Ayatollah and his well-organized network of clerics quickly outmaneuvered their rivals. In April 1979, a national referendum was held and the Iranian people overwhelmingly voted to abolish the monarchy. The people voted to establish an Islamic Republic. The revolution was not just a change of government, it was a fundamental reshaping of the state's identity. It was based on Khomeini's vision of Vilayat-e-Faqih, or the guardianship of the Islamic jurist, which placed ultimate political authority in the hands of the clergy. Section 3. The Islamic Republic: War, Consolidation, and Defiance. The new Islamic Republic faced immediate and immense challenges to its survival. Revolutionary fervor culminated in the seizure of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran in November 1979. Student militants seized the embassy. 52 American diplomats were held hostage for 444 days. The act severed relations with the United States. It cast Iran as a pariah state in the West, and it led to a long, punishing regime of economic sanctions. Internally, the clerical leadership moved to consolidate power. They purged rival revolutionary factions, leftists, nationalists. A new constitution was implemented. It created elected institutions, starting with a president and a parliament, alongside unelected clerical bodies, all under the supreme authority of Ayatollah Khomeini. The Republic's most severe test came in September 1980. Neighboring Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein launched a full-scale invasion of Iran. Saddam expected a swift victory. He hoped to take advantage of Iran's post-revolutionary chaos and to seize the oil-rich Khuzestan province. The ensuing Iran-Iraq War lasted 8 brutal years. It was a devastating war of attrition, trench warfare, human wave attacks, and the use of chemical weapons by Iraq. The war exacted a terrible human and economic toll, hundreds of thousands killed. Yet the war also rallied the nation behind the new government. It unified the country against a foreign aggressor, and it helped solidify the Islamic Republic's grip on power. Following Khomeini's death in 1989, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was chosen as supreme leader. The post-war period was one of reconstruction and shifting priorities. The government under pragmatist Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani and reformist Mohammad Khatami attempted to rebuild the shattered economy and to cautiously re-engage with the outside world. But the era was defined by a constant internal power struggle. Reformist factions seeking greater social and political freedoms versus hardline conservatives entrenched in the judiciary, security forces like the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Supreme Leader's Office. They resisted changes seen as threats to the revolution's core values. This tension was exacerbated by Iran's foreign policy. The Islamic Republic defined itself in opposition to the United States and to Israel. It supported allied groups across the Middle East, such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, as part of a strategy of forward defense. That regional policy, combined with a controversial nuclear program, brought Iran into constant conflict with the West. Iran insisted its nuclear program was for peaceful energy. The US and its allies feared it was a cover for weapons development. This led to increasingly stringent international sanctions. The sanctions crippled Iran's economy, isolated it financially, and placed immense pressure on Iranian society, setting the stage for a new wave of internal discontent. Section 4. A New Century of Unrest. Protests and the Path to 2026. The simmering tensions within Iranian society erupted into full view with the 2009 Green Movement. Following the disputed presidential election that awarded a victory to the hardline incumbent Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, millions of Iranians poured into the streets of Tehran and other cities in the largest protests since the 1979 revolution. The demonstrators, largely from the urban middle class, demanded that their votes be counted and chanted for greater political freedom. The government responded with a brutal crackdown, crushing the movement with arrests, show trials, and violence. The Green Movement was ultimately suppressed, but it revealed the deep fractures within the Islamic Republic and the profound disillusionment of the younger, post-revolutionary generation. The following decade saw a recurring pattern of protest and repression, driven by a combination of economic hardship and political frustration. The crippling effect of international sanctions, coupled with domestic mismanagement and corruption, led to high inflation, unemployment, and a declining standard of living. Unlike the 2009 protests, waves in late 2017 and 2019 were led by the working class and the economically disenfranchised in provincial towns across the country. These protests were more radical in their demands, often directly targeting the entire ruling establishment, including the supreme leader, with slogans calling for an end to the Islamic Republic itself. Each time, the state responded with overwhelming force, killing hundreds and arresting thousands to maintain its grip on power. The most significant wave of unrest began in late 2022 with the death of Mahsa Amini in the custody of the morality police, sparking the Woman Life Freedom movement. These protests were unprecedented in their duration, their geographical spread, and the leading role played by women and young people. Protesters challenged the very symbols of the regime, with women publicly burning their headscarves in defiance of the mandatory hijab laws. The movement represented a fundamental rejection of the social and political strictures imposed by the Islamic Republic. Despite another brutal crackdown that killed thousands of protesters into early 2026, the state's legitimacy was severely damaged, and the deep chasm between the ruling elite and a large segment of the populace grew wider than ever. This escalating cycle of internal suppression and defiance formed the volatile backdrop to the events of 2026. The regime, weakened at home but defiant abroad, found itself on a collision course with its external adversaries. The domestic turmoil, combined with Iran's assertive regional policies and advancing nuclear program, created a perfect storm. The internal protests had stretched the security apparatus thin and exposed the regime's vulnerability, perhaps convincing its enemies that it was a moment of opportunity. The Long Shadow War, fought for decades in the realms of cyber attacks, assassinations, and proxy conflicts, was about to erupt into open, direct warfare, bringing Iran's tumultuous modern history to a dramatic and violent climax. Section 1. A Nation at the Precipice. The long-simmering conflict finally boiled over on February 28, 2026. In a dramatic escalation of the Shadow War, surprise airstrikes hit across Iran, launched by the United States, launched by Israel. The most significant strike hit a residence in Tehran, killing Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. His death, confirmed a day later, sent shockwaves across the region and the world. The attack was devastatingly precise and killed several family members, including his daughter, his son-in-law, and his wife, leaving a sudden, bloody vacuum at the top of the state. The decapitation strike marked the start of full-scale war. The Iranian response was swift and furious. The IRGC unleashed a massive barrage of missiles and drones, strikes against Israel, strikes against American bases across the Middle East, targets in Qatar, in the UAE, in Kuwait, in Saudi Arabia. The IRGC declared the Strait of Hormuz closed to vessels linked to the US, to vessels linked to Israel, and to their allies. The closure choked off roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply, triggering a severe energy crisis. Markets and governments watched in alarm. Iran's establishment moved quickly to ensure continuity. The Assembly of Experts convened and elected Mojtaba Khamenei as supreme leader, a mid-ranking cleric known for shadowy influence, notably involved in suppressing the 2009 protests. Mojtaba stepped into the spotlight. IRGC commanders pledged allegiance. Political leaders pledged allegiance. Mojtaba's first public statement was defiant. He called for national unity, vowed to keep the strait closed, and promised continued attacks on U.S. bases. Oil prices surged past $100 per barrel, reaching their highest levels in years as markets panicked over the massive supply disruption. The crisis was described as the largest shock to the energy market since the 1970s. Chinese manufacturers warned of price hikes for goods bound for the United States. The events of 2026 thrust Iran to center stage of a global crisis, with the world feeling the consequences. Section 2. The Secret of Survival and Enduring Legacy. So we return to our central question: how has Iran survived for 5,000 years? How has it weathered the fall of empires, the fury of conquerors like Alexander, Genghis Khan, and the pressures of modern warfare and revolution? The first part of the answer lies in its geography. The Iranian plateau, ringed by formidable mountains and harsh deserts, provides a natural fortress. This challenging terrain has made it difficult for invaders to conquer and hold, allowing pockets of resistance to endure and local cultures to persist even when central governments have collapsed. This very geography has also made Iran a natural crossroads, forcing it to constantly interact with, absorb, and adapt to the peoples and ideas flowing through it, breeding a culture of resilience. The second key to survival is the incredible depth of its institutions and culture. Long before many other civilizations, the Achaemenids developed a sophisticated model of administration that was so effective it was adopted by subsequent conquerors, from Seleucids to Arab caliphs. This bureaucratic persistence ensured continuity even when rulers changed. More powerful still is the Persian language and the cultural memory it carries. Epics like Ferdowsi's Shahnameh created an unbreakable link to a glorious past, preserving a sense of shared identity through centuries of foreign rule and political fragmentation. This cultural gravity has repeatedly proven strong enough to Persianize conquerors, absorbing them into the very civilization they sought to dominate. Religion has also been a powerful tool for both differentiation and unity. The Sassanids used Zoroastrianism to forge a national identity distinct from the Roman world. Later, the Safavids did the same with Shia Islam, creating a powerful ideological barrier against their Sunni neighbors and laying the foundation for the modern nation-state. This unique religious identity, deeply intertwined with Persian culture, has provided a powerful rallying point in times of crisis, from the Safavid wars against the Ottomans to the Iran-Iraq war under the Islamic Republic. It has defined who is us versus them, providing a deep well of ideological strength and motivation for collective action and sacrifice. Ultimately, Iran endures because it is not a monolithic entity, but a layered and complex civilization. Its identity is a tapestry woven from threads of imperial statecraft, linguistic pride, distinct religious belief, and fierce local independence. It has survived by bending without breaking, by absorbing its conquerors, by retreating into its cultural memory during dark times, and by re-emerging with a renewed sense of self. The crisis of 2026 is but the latest, most violent test in this long history. As the world grapples with the fallout, The 5,000-year story of Iran suggests that while regimes may fall and borders may shift, the deep-rooted civilization of this ancient land possesses a remarkable and enduring capacity for survival.